So are conservatives treating Paul Pelosi's attacker like Kyle Rittenhouse? Let's talk about it in today's video. Hi, I'm Mike Reiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist who's concerned about the direction our country is taking. I'm also a lawyer and an academic, and I'm here to help you stand up to the BS of the MAGA crowd. So I've been thinking about doing a video talking about just how much the Republicans, with their insurrectionist language, are responsible for the kind of violence that resulted in the attack on Paul Pelosi. But generally speaking, they've kind of couched their criticisms in saying, oh, this is terrible, but what about all these other things? And I thought about doing a video where I actually do compare some of these things. Like, for example, the individual who went to the Supreme Court with the aim of killing one of the Supreme Court justices. Well, number one, he never actually went forward with the attack. And number two, that threat resulted in a whole new security regime at the Supreme Court, put in place by Democrats. Similarly, when Steve Scalise was attacked and shot at the congressional softball game, every Democrat supported prosecuting the shooter to the fullest extent of the law. And of course, we've heard about Kathy Griffin and her paper head of Donald Trump, but she's a comedian. Comedians do all sorts of crazy stuff. Did she go a little too far that time? Well, maybe, but comedians tend to go a little too far. That's kind of their job, isn't it? And in fact, most progressives basically said they thought she'd gone too far. But in general, the reaction of the conservatives to this attack, while it has been annoying, hasn't gone to the lengths to lionize Paul Pelosi's attacker the way they did with Kyle Rittenhouse. Until now. Let's check out this video here.
I mean, I'm looking at Politico.com. I'm looking at the New York Times. I'm looking at all these places, and there's like...
This is Charlie Kirk, by the way, on his podcast. Let's keep watching.
A little bit of mention here. For example, Politico says top Republicans reject any link between GOP rhetoric and Paul Pelosi assault. Of course you should reject any link. Why is the Republican Party, why is the conservative movement to blame for gay schizophrenic nudists that are hemp jewelry makers breaking into somebody's home, or maybe not breaking into somebody's home?
Okay, let's stop right there, because this whole line of attack, which is that somehow he's not a conservative because he is a nudist and hemp jewelry maker, all of which is kind of in question anyway, really is ridiculous. I don't know any progressives who are nudists or hemp jewelry makers. There is no relationship between your political views and your enjoyment of nudity. But this attack that he's supposedly a gay person plays into the discrimination against the LGBTQ community and was actually perpetuated by Elon Musk in a Twitter feed. Finally, he's right that this person clearly had mental issues. But that's the point, is there are people out there with mental health issues, like schizophrenia. But the Republican rhetoric has basically created this situation where they feel like they need to act with violence. I mean, Donald Trump has as much as called for violence in his rallies, directly, saying that he'd defend people who beat up reporters. And we all know about his encouragement of the January 6th insurrection. But this idea that this individual was encouraged by conservative rhetoric is not just some kind of speculation. He actually has blog posts that he has, which mirror the rhetoric of the conservatives calling for violence against progressives and the mainstream media. To say that this was anything other than a political hit job, at least in part as a result of Republican rhetoric, is disingenuous. But this gets worse. Let's keep watching.
Why are we to blame for that exactly? And why is he still in jail? Why has he not been bailed out? By the way, if some amazing patriot out there in San Francisco or the Bay Area wants to really be a midterm hero, someone should go and bail this guy out. I bet his bail's like $30,000 or $40,000.
Okay, now, this is where it gets interesting. So much for the logical fallacies that you see in these videos by the Republicans. Because on the one hand, here's Charlie Kirk saying, oh, we're not responsible. We have nothing to do with this guy. On the other hand, he's saying, oh, one of us should go and bail out this guy to get him out of jail. So which is it? Are you responsible for him or are you not responsible for him? You can't have it both ways. But I think the reality is that this is clearly a conservative, much like Kyle Rittenhouse was in Wisconsin. And conservatives want to encourage the kind of violence the kind of political violence that will disrupt our country, because that's the only way that they can maintain power. They are in the minority at this point, something that we now have seen as a result of the midterm elections even more clearly. So what we're seeing from Charlie Kirk here is the effort to turn this guy from the criminal that he is, who is inspired by the rhetoric of leading conservatives, into something of a right-wing hero, much like Kyle Rittenhouse. Let's keep watching.
Bucks. Bail him out and then go ask him some questions. I wonder what his bail is. They're going after him with attempted murder, political assassination, all this sort of stuff. I'm not qualifying it. I think it's awful. It's not right.
Oh yeah, that was sincere. Let's keep watching.
But why is it that in Chicago, you're able to commit murder and be out the next day? Why is it that you're able to trespass, second-degree murder, arson, threat of public official?
Okay, that's all BS. Let's remember the fact, by the way, as I've illustrated in a number of videos, that this whole crime wave that's going on in democratic cities, while to be sure there are problems with it, that in fact the worst crime is occurring in Republican states. And people are not being released the next day after murdering someone in Chicago. At some point when these people say these lies that inspire people to act with violence, we need to call them on it. And that's exactly what Charlie Kirk is doing here. And I'm calling BS. Let's keep watching.
Cashless bail. This happens all over San Francisco, but if you go after the Pelosi's, oh, you're let out immediately.
Again, total BS. There is no widespread release of violent criminals in San Francisco, or in Chicago for that matter, or anywhere in the country really. And as I've said a number of times, the statistics point to the fact that violent crime is actually higher in Republican areas than it is in most Democratic areas. But let's not let the facts get in the way of a good story. This is proof that the Republicans support this kind of violence, and that they are not interested in being legitimate participants in our democratic system. Well, if you don't believe me that Republicans have been threatening all kinds of violence in response to their lack of electoral success, check out this video over here. You can just see how they are poisoning the American political system and making the kind of violence that we saw against Paul Pelosi acceptable. I'll see you then. In the meantime, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.